This next order relates to the definition of birthright citizenship under the 14th Amendment of the United States.
It's ridiculous. We're the only country in the world that does this with birthright.
We have something special here and something different in the United States. Doesn't matter where you come from, doesn't matter what race you are, doesn't matter what ethnicity your parents were, doesn't matter what religion you are. You're an American. If you're a Chinese American, you're American. Jewish American, you're American. Irish American, you're American. It's one of the great glories of the United States of America. That's what gives us that special status where Americanness is not defined by your race, your religion, your ethnicity. Anybody born in this country is American. Hey everyone, I'm Jed Rubenfeld and this is Straight Down the Middle. Today I'm going to be talking about Trump's executive orders, and one of them in particular, the famous Birthright Citizenship order, which has already been enjoined by a federal court. And I want to say right from the jump, I think Trump issued some great day one executive orders. For example, his order abolishing DEI programs throughout the federal government, that's a great order. His orders directed at the immigration crisis on the southern border, trying to do something about the mass migration policies effected in the previous administration, those are tremendous executive orders. But today we're going to be talking about the Birthright Citizenship order, and that one, sorry, unconstitutional. That's my verdict. Now, as always, I'm going to give you both sides of the argument, and you'll be able to make up your own mind. But I'll do my best to explain to you why I think this one is unconstitutional. First, though, how about some background? What the heck is an executive order, and what exactly does this executive order say? Okay, executive orders are not mysterious. They're a formal, published document in which the President of the United States issues an order to somebody that he has the power to issue an order to. Typically, agency officials, or the head of an agency, or the head of a department, like the Attorney General. So, are executive orders something new in our country? Is it kind of suspect, a little strange? No, not at all. Every president throughout United States history has had the power to issue executive orders. Most of them have. The first executive order was actually issued by George Washington in 1789. So there's nothing suspicious about them. Is President Trump going to issue more executive orders than is normal? Maybe. We don't know yet. But I'll tell you what, I don't think he's going to break the record set by FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who in the 30s and 40s issued over 3,000 executive orders. Okay, now, what does this particular executive order say? The one we're talking about, the famous Birthright Citizenship Executive Order. Okay, so what is birthright citizenship? Simple idea. If you're born in this country, you're a citizen of this country. That's the idea of birthright citizenship. If you're like most people and you're American and you applied for a passport, what did you have to show? You had to show ID, but you also had to show your birth certificate. And if that birth certificate indicated that you were born in the United States, that's all you had to show. That meant you're a citizen. They didn't ask you who your parents were, where they came from, what their status was. If you were born in this country, you got that passport, you're a citizen. That's birthright citizenship. Now, the Trump executive order revokes that. It revokes that for a lot of kids whose parents are aliens. You may have heard that it's revoking birthright citizenship for the children of illegal aliens. And that's true, it does that. But it goes further than that. If your parents, both of your parents, were here on visas like a work visa or an educational visa, then you're not a citizen. Now, I know what you might be thinking to yourself. You might be saying, Professor, I think I might be in favor of that executive order. I think I'm definitely in favor of not giving the children of illegal alien citizenship, you might be saying. And maybe, I don't know, maybe also it shouldn't go to children of people here on temporary visas. Well, if that's what you're thinking, I might agree with a lot of what you just said. If it were a matter of policy, if it were up to me, I don't think the children of illegal aliens should be citizens by birth. Okay? I don't think so. That wouldn't be my policy preference. But guess what? We have this little thing in this country called the United States Constitution. And on some matters, it doesn't make any difference what your policy preference is. If the Constitution provides for it one way or the other, that's it. That's what goes. I'd ask you to think about the Second Amendment. Let's say that you're in favor of the Second Amendment. You like gun rights. But you know there's a lot of people out there who hate gun rights. They think firearms, handguns should be banned. That might be their policy preference, but guess what? Foundational to this country If the Second Amendment provides for gun rights, which it does, that's what trumps. As between somebody's policy preference and the United States Constitution, guess what? The Constitution wins. Okay, so the question is, does the Constitution say anything about birthright citizenship? Well, yes, it does. 14th Amendment has a birthright citizenship clause in it. First sentence says that everybody born in the United States shall be a citizen of the United States. Well, that sounds like that ends the matter, right? Nothing else to it, right? No, that's not the end of the matter, because it doesn't guarantee birthright citizenship to everybody born in this country. There's a little exception. There's a clause tacked onto that sentence that says you got to be born in this country and be subject to the jurisdiction of the United States. That's the clause that's creating an argument here. That's the clause on which is based this new Trump executive order. So we got to ask ourselves, what does that mean, subject to the jurisdiction of the United States? What do those words mean? Well, I'll tell you, those words have a very well-established meaning in the law. For a couple hundred years, the meaning of subject to the jurisdiction of the United States has been pretty clear. Let me explain to you what it is. What it means is, are you subject to our laws? If you break a law in our country, can we prosecute you? Can we haul you into prison, prosecute you, throw you in jail if you're convicted? In almost all cases, yes, you can. If you commit a murder, you can be prosecuted for it. Of course you can. But there are a few categories of people in the United States who are actually exempted from that simple, basic, fundamental duty of having to obey our laws. What categories of people are those? Well, one very well-known such category, foreign ambassadors. Yes, for hundreds of years, the ambassador from another country has been understood not to be subject to our laws. And likewise, when we send an ambassador to another country, our ambassadors aren't subject to their laws. An ambassador, you give an ambassador a parking ticket here in New York City, they don't have to pay. That's true even today. They are exempt from our laws. They are exempt from our criminal laws. So they're not subject to our jurisdiction. Now, this has been well known in the law, as I say, for a couple hundred years, and they use this very term. For example, there's a well-known Supreme Court case decided by Chief Justice Marshall himself involving a consular official, not the ambassador. You go down a couple of rungs to the consular official. And Marshall said, for the United States Supreme Court, he's subject to our laws. He's not like the ambassador. The ambassador, he's not subject to our jurisdiction. Consular official, he is subject to our jurisdiction. And they use that exact phrase, subject to our jurisdiction, subject to the jurisdiction of the United States. So that's a phrase with a very well-known meaning. And the meaning is, or has been, or was well understood to be, subject to our laws. If they violate our laws, can you arrest them? Can you prosecute them? Can you throw them in prison? If you can, well, then they're subject to our jurisdiction. Anybody else besides ambassadors? Well, yeah, there are a couple of very narrow categories. Invading armies. So this was a big deal in Europe. Some army from Germany would take Alsace-Lorraine, and then the French would take it back, and then the Germans would take it back. And there was this exception. If the occupying army from Germany came to Alsace-Lorraine and they conquered it, and they brought some Germans with them, well, if they had kids, those kids weren't subject to French jurisdiction. No, they were subject to German jurisdiction if they were in a conquered territory. Now, fortunately, in the United States, we've never really had to worry about that in our country, but that was an understood exception, another second exception to being subject to jurisdiction. Was there another exception? Yes, there was. American Indians, Native Americans. There was a lot of discussion of this in the 1860s, and the understanding was, back then, that the Indians, they're actually a separate nation. That's how they were regarded back in the 1860s and right up for the first 100 years of America's history. They're a separate sovereign nation. If you're on Indian lands in the West or carved out from some state and an Indian there commits a crime, can the United States, can the federal prosecutor come in and prosecute him for whatever the crime was, murder? No, he cannot, because United States laws didn't reach Indian lands. Well, Professor, how about state laws? If they're located in a state, surely the state can prosecute them for like a murder committed on Indian. No, they could not. Indian lands were not subject to the laws of the states or the federal government. They were not subject to the jurisdiction of the United States. They were outside our jurisdiction. Now, all that would change starting in 1871. They were no longer regarded as sovereign nations. The federal government started passing laws saying, yeah, we're going to pass some murder laws. They're going to apply to Indian lands. But that wasn't how things were understood back for the first 100 years, right through the 1860s. So Indians were regarded as not subject to our jurisdiction. It's probably true that the 14th Amendment, as originally passed, excluded, at that time, Indians, because at that time they were regarded and treated by the law as not subject to U.S. jurisdiction. They were separate sovereign nations. But once you've understood that that's what subject to jurisdiction means, having to obey our laws, then of course it's pretty easy to say whether the children of aliens, even illegal aliens, but certainly lawfully present aliens, pretty easy to say whether they're subject to our jurisdiction. Answer, yes, of course they are. If they commit murder in the United States, can we prosecute them under the laws of the state or the federal government? Can you arrest them, prosecute them, try them in court, throw them in jail? Of course you can. Aliens, children of aliens, of course they have to obey our laws. Of course they're subject to our jurisdiction. So, from that point of view, easy case. Aliens are subject to our jurisdiction. Their kids are subject to our jurisdiction. They get birthright citizenship too. And in the 1890s, the Supreme Court had a case raising just this issue, the child of some Chinese foreign nationals in California. And the Supreme Court in the 1890s held, yes, they are citizens. They're subject to our jurisdiction. The United States Supreme Court went through exactly what I'm telling you right now, what the meaning of subject to the jurisdiction of the United States is, and the various exempted categories, and how aliens, lawfully present aliens, if you put aside ambassadors, invading armies, if you put aside Indians on Indian lands, of course aliens are subject to our jurisdiction, and of course, therefore, under the Constitution, 14th Amendment, their children get birthright citizenship. So, that was the holding of the Supreme Court in the 1890s. They've never departed from that. Under that Supreme Court case, there's a pretty good argument that this new executive order revoking birthright citizenship for aliens is unconstitutional. Now, is that the end of the matter? At that point, does everybody go home? Do the supporters of that executive order just say, okay, we give up, you're right, we lose, it's unconstitutional? No, they do not. They have an argument. They think it's a pretty darn good argument. What is that argument? They say the right way to interpret the Constitution is through original intentions, originalism. And guess what? We're looking at the debates in the United States Congress. We've got especially good records of the senatorial debates. And guess what? The senators who proposed that language, that citizenship language, they told us. They told us what their intentions were. And they told us that it does not include aliens. It does not include the children of aliens. And in particular, they cite to the statement of Senator Jacob Howard. Now, Howard's the guy, he's not just any senator, he was the one who proposed this citizenship language. And they have a sentence from him where he says that it would not include the children of foreigners, aliens who are family members of foreign ministers and ambassadors. Now, the supporters of this executive order, they say, game, set, match. He just said it right there, didn't he? He just told you that birthright citizenship did not apply to the children of aliens, so game over. Well, is the game over? Well, we got to think about this a little more carefully. A couple of things you got to know. Number one, even from the point of view of originalism, you don't just look at the debates in Congress. There's a lot more to be considered. There's the ratifying conventions. There's the original public understanding. What would the original educated public have thought this constitutional amendment meant? Because after all, the idea is that the American people ratify the amendments to their Constitution, ratify their entire Constitution. And you got to ask, what would members of the public have understood? How would they have understood this language? More than that, if you're going to look at the debates in Congress, to the extent we're going to look at that, you don't ever just look at the statement of one senator. I don't care if he's the sponsor of the language. You got to look at the rest of the debate. What did the other senators say? Well, there is more to that debate. And that's what the supporters of this executive order, they don't like to focus on, and they haven't been too voluble about this, but I'll tell you what happened later in that debate. They brought up the question of the children of Chinese nationals out in California. There was a Senator Cowan from Pennsylvania, and he rose and he said, gentlemen, I'm concerned about this amendment because this amendment will make the children of Chinese foreign nationals aliens out in California, citizens. He said, I ask you that question. Will it or won't it do that? Now, he didn't refer to Howard's statement. He didn't say, I think Howard was mistaken. I think it covers him. He just said, that's what this provision is going to do. And he said, I'm against it. He said, those are people of a different race. They have different value smarts. They have different cultural norms. They have allegiance to the Chinese emperor. We don't want their children as our citizens. Next, you'll be telling us they have the right to vote. Well, next to rise was a senator from California. Conness was his name. And he said, yes, that's exactly what this provision does. It will make the children of Chinese nationals out in my state citizens. That's exactly what it does, and we ask you to vote for it with that understanding. You've got to remember, the country had just fought a brutal civil war. So from the point of view of people like Conness, we had just fought a war to say that anybody born in this country, no matter of what race, white or non-white, is a citizen of this country. We just fought a war over that. We all agree that this provision is going to make citizens out of every black American, formerly slave, not slave. They're going to be citizens. Their kids are going to be citizens. We all agree about that. Well, that's exactly what we're doing here. We're making the kids of everybody in America, if they're born in America, we don't care what race they are, they're citizens. Now, nobody said, wait a second, I disagree. I don't think this language means that. Howard himself, he didn't rise and say, no, hang on, doesn't mean that. Nobody said that. That was the debate the senators had. Those who were against the amendment said, it's going to turn the kids of Chinese nationals into citizens. Don't vote for it. Those in favor of the amendment said, yeah, that's exactly what it's going to do. So do vote for it. And the senators voted for it. Now, to me, that is pretty clear evidence that a great many senators, quite possibly a majority of the senators, understood that the citizenship clause would make citizens out of the children of aliens, like the Chinese nationals out in California. They were very clear about it, and they voted in favor of that amendment with that understanding. Now I'm going to come back to Howard's statement, because now I'm going to give you a little taste of how lawyers look really carefully at language, and how constitutional scholars will parse language, maybe more than we should. But it is a little mystery. How come nobody said, well, Howard got it wrong? How come Howard himself didn't stand up and say, no, that's not what it means? Well, if you look at the language which I quoted to you before, what Howard said was, it will exclude the children of foreigners, aliens, who are members of the family of ministers and ambassadors. Now, he didn't say foreigners, aliens, and the members of the family. It was foreigners, aliens, who are members of the family. You know, transcripts sometimes aren't 100% clear, but if you look at this carefully, he's not saying necessarily what the proponents of the executive order are saying he's saying. Because actually, why would he refer to the families of ambassadors and ministers if he had already said it excludes the children of aliens? I mean, those foreign ministers and ambassadors, they are aliens. All he's got to say is, it'll exclude the children of aliens. He didn't say that. He said exclude the children of foreigners, aliens who are members of the family of ambassadors and ministers. It looks like he might well have been saying, it'll exclude the children of aliens who are members of the family of ambassadors or ministers. So, if that's what he was saying and that's what he meant, then he's just repeating the common understanding of subject to jurisdiction. That group's going to be excluded, as everybody understood. And he wasn't saying anything bigger or broader like it excludes the children of all aliens. We don't know for sure what Howard said. What we do know is he never rose later in the debate to say, no, hang on, I already told you, it doesn't cover aliens. Nobody said that. Folks who wanted that citizenship amendment voted down, they said, that's going to turn the Chinese kids into citizens. Those who wanted it voted through, they said, yeah, it will, and that's why you should vote for it. So I think on balance, if we're looking at that senatorial debate, there's pretty good reason to conclude that the actual understanding shared by quite a lot of senators, maybe the majority of the senators, was that, in fact, it would grant citizenship to aliens. Now, all that said, is there still any argument yet to be made in favor of the executive order that Trump signed? There still is one last argument. And it goes like this. That 1890s case that you referred to before, Professor, in which the Supreme Court held that the children of aliens, lawfully present aliens in the United States, are citizens by birth under the 14th Amendment. Well, let me stress that point. It held that the children of lawfully present aliens become citizens under the 14th Amendment. And in fact, the parents in that case were referred to a couple times in the opinion as permanent lawful residents. Yes, they were Chinese nationals. They themselves were not citizens, but they were lawfully present, and the case refers to them a couple of times as permanent residents. So the supporters of the executive order say that's all that the case covers. Let's think about illegal aliens for a second, that they're not actually covered by that 1890s case. And you know what? This is what the proponents of that executive order will say. They're differently situated, and let me tell you exactly why. Because their action, when they came across our borders illegally, they put themselves outside our jurisdiction. We're not doing it, they did it. By coming across our border illegally, they're telling the whole world, we don't respect your laws. Your laws don't apply to us. We're outside of your jurisdiction. We're coming in openly violating, not openly, but we're coming in violating your laws. We are telling you that we don't respect your laws. We are thereby putting ourselves outside your jurisdiction. Can you make that argument? Well, I don't know if that's a great argument. Because after all, if they commit a crime on U.S. soil, of course we can arrest them. Of course we can prosecute them. So in that sense, they are still subject to the jurisdiction of the United States. But I want to make a different argument, even above and beyond that, because I want to be clear about this point. The proponents of the executive order repeatedly make a certain mistake. They keep talking as if the relevant person is the illegal alien himself. And even if you think that through his own actions, the illegal alien somehow puts himself outside our jurisdiction, does the child inherit the sin of the parent? They forget to make that leap. Even if it's true that by coming across our borders illegally, the illegal alien is not accepting our jurisdiction, that doesn't apply to his child. Not in our country. They don't inherit by blood the sins of their parents. That's not how things work in this country. Now, the proponents of the executive order, they can say, well, hang on, if they came from Mexico, maybe we should look at Mexican law, because under Mexican law, maybe the kids remain citizens of Mexico. Now, since when would Mexican law determine whether, under our Constitution, somebody is a citizen by birth under the 14th Amendment? It doesn't make any sense. So the kids of parents who come from one country might not be citizens, but the kids who come from some other country where citizenship doesn't transfer like that, they would be our citizens. United States constitutional law does not turn on what the law of Mexico is or what international law says. The United States Constitution has its own meaning, and what it says is, if you're born in this country and subject to our jurisdiction, subject to our laws, you're a citizen. And the children of illegal aliens, whatever your policy preference might be, they are subject to our laws, and if they're born here, I think that means they're citizens. And I want to close by telling you something a little more general about birthright citizenship, maybe to explain why this is important. We have something special here and something different in the United States. In the United States, you can be a Chinese American, you can be a French American, you can be an English American, you can be an Irish American. They don't have that in Europe. You can't be a Chinese Japanese or a Japanese Chinese or an Irish Frenchman. That they don't use those terms. They don't talk that way. They don't recognize those terms. In the countries of Europe, they began as ethnic nations. The people of Germany were Germans by blood. People of France, French by blood. That was the idea. And they passed down their Germanness or Frenchness by blood. We don't have that in America. America stands for a different principle. Doesn't matter where you come from. Doesn't matter what race you are. Doesn't matter what ethnicity your parents were. Doesn't matter what religion you are. You're an American. If you're a Chinese American, you're American. Jewish American, you're American. Irish American, you're American. It's one of the great glories of the United States of America. It's one of the things to be most proud of. And that's what birthright citizenship stands for. That's what gives us that special status where Americanness is not defined by your race your religion, your ethnicity. Anybody born in this country is American, with those three very narrow exceptions that I mentioned. That's how we forge a nation that is not divided by race, ethnicity, religion. And that's why you should be proud of the principle of birthright citizenship. It's part of the greatness of the United States. And even if we might disagree as a policy matter with some of the consequences, it is something to defend, something to be proud of. Well, that's all for today. I'm saying goodbye. Stay tuned for more episodes of Straight Down the Middle.